The earth holds memories older than our words. Beneath every stone and grain of soil lies a silence that once thundered with lives now forgotten, with footsteps that shaped landscapes we no longer recognize. What if the ground beneath us still carries the echoes of civilizations erased, the whispers of giants, and the traces of a world reset again and again? The further we peer into Earth's shadowed history, the less certain the timeline becomes. We are left with fragments, mysteries, and questions that stretch beyond the human story we think we know. If you are drawn to these riddles of deep time, to the wonder of lost ages and unrecorded lives, then stay with us on this journey. And if you wish to support these explorations into Earth's hidden chapters, remember to like this video, share it with others who question what lies beneath the surface of history, and subscribe so you never miss a step into the past. Now, let us walk together into the silence of forgotten ages. The river is older than memory. Long before names or maps, it wound across the plains like a silver serpent, carrying the promise of life in its slow current. Its banks shifted with the seasons, swelling with meltwater from distant mountains and shrinking to mudflats under the weight of drought. To those who followed its path, the river was not simply water, it was destiny. Along its bends and tributaries, the first humans shaped their fragile existence, tethered to the rhythm of an earth that demanded both reverence and resilience. The air in those days was thick with ash. Volcanic eruptions shook the planet during the Pleistocene, veiling the sun in drifting clouds that dimmed the horizon. Great plumes rose from the Earth's crust, scattering black rain across savanna and desert, cooling the climate in pulses that reshaped the very course of survival. In these landscapes, small bands of Homo sapiens pressed forward, their lives bound to fire and water, to the search for food, to the perpetual migration that kept them alive. They carried little beyond tools chipped from flint and obsidian, scraps of hide to guard against the chill, and an oral memory passed down like fire from one generation to the next. At night, the world was almost unbearable in its silence. Stars burned with a clarity lost to us now, unmarred by the haze of civilization's smoke or the glow of our cities. The Milky Way stretched above them as both map and mystery. Around the fire, stories were murmured, half memory, half imagination, shaping the earliest frameworks of myth. The flames flickered against faces hardened by hunger and sharpened by vigilance. Children slept in huddled clusters, and adults kept their weapons close, for the dark was never truly empty. Lions prowled the grasslands, hyenas laughed in the distance, and now and then the ground trembled with the tread of elephants and rhinoceros that dwarfed their modern descendants. In this world of uncertainty, rivers and volcanic ash formed a strange covenant. Where fire devastated, rivers renewed. Ash enriched the soil, feeding the roots of plants that would nourish game animals, which in turn nourished humans. It was an unbroken cycle of destruction and rebirth, one that early humans learned to endure, perhaps even to respect. Survival depended not only on skill, but on intuition, on reading the world with senses sharpened to the finest edge. The shape of clouds, the scent of wet earth, the flight of birds, the whisper of wind against tall grass, all became signals in a language older than words. Imagine the first sight of a river's floodplain after months of thirst. Cracked mud softened into silt, reeds rose where nothing had stood before. Fish shimmered beneath shallow ripples. To stumble upon such abundance after hunger would have been nothing short of miraculous, but even abundance held danger. Crocodiles lay hidden in the shallows, and disease brewed in stagnant pools. Survival required balance, to take from the river, but not be taken by it. This delicate relationship shaped the earliest rhythms of settlement, the first whispers of stability in an otherwise restless existence. The ash, too, told its own story. Sometimes it arrived as a distant haze, filtering sunlight into a copper glow. Other times it fell thick and heavy, muffling sound and turning day into twilight. One can imagine the fear that must have gripped those who saw the sky darken without explanation, who felt cold where once there was warmth. Some fled the ash, others adapted to it. Archaeologists suggest that the Toba eruption some 74,000 years ago nearly extinguished humanity itself, narrowing our genetic line to a fragile thread of survivors. If that is true, then the ash was not just a background to their lives, but an existential force, an elemental test that only a few endured. From that crucible, the story of modern humanity emerged. Yet for all its brutality, the landscape also gave gifts: flint for blades, obsidian for cutting, bones for tools, hides for warmth. Fire, once stolen from lightning or volcanic vents, became something controlled, nurtured, passed like a secret. Around it, communities drew closer, and perhaps for the first time, they glimpsed a world beyond immediate survival. Firelight lengthened the day, giving space for thought, song, and the rhythm of language. Ash and river, destruction and renewal. These forces carved not only the earth but the human mind, teaching adaptability, patience, and wonder. The hunt defined much of their lives. Across open plains, they tracked gazelles and antelopes, reading spoor and broken grass with the precision of instinct. Spears tipped with sharpened stone flew through the air, guided by years of practice, by the urgency of hunger. Each hunt was a gamble. Success meant meat, marrow, skins, and sinew. Failure meant another night of gnawing emptiness. But the hunt was not only practical, it carried ritual weight. To bring down a great beast was to affirm one's place within the larger order of the world, to share in a cycle that bound predator and prey, hunter and hunted. Water was never far from thought. Even as they hunted and gathered, the first humans marked their lives by the nearness of rivers. To be far from water was to court death. Migration patterns followed not arbitrary lines but the bends of streams, the rhythm of rainfall, the shadow of lakes. Where rivers met, life gathered. Where rivers dried, silence fell. Some of these rivers are gone now, lost beneath deserts or buried under layers of shifting earth. Satellite imagery has revealed ghost channels in the Sahara and Arabia, suggesting that what we now call wasteland was once veined with lifelines of green. The people who followed them are gone, but their paths may still echo beneath the sand. Consider the moment when a child, born into this uncertain world, first learned to cup water in her hands. To her, the river was not science, not geography, but something alive, a presence to be approached with care, to be trusted and feared in equal measure. Such moments repeat across millennia, countless times, until rivers became gods in later ages, deified as Nile, Ganges, Euphrates, Tiber. The roots of worship lie not in abstraction, but in survival, in the awe felt by those who understood just how fragile existence was without water's gift. Ash, too, lingered in memory. Perhaps it became a warning, a story told by elders, of skies that turned black, of beasts that vanished, of cold that crept into the bones of the earth. Perhaps it became myth, the wrath of gods, the fire of giants, the smoke of a world before ours. What we call geology, they may have called destiny. What we measure in carbon dates, they pass down in trembling words beside the fire. As we look back now, It is easy to imagine progress as inevitable, as though these first humans were only a prologue. But in truth, they were the story itself. Each step taken along a riverbank, each fire lit against the ash-darkened sky, was a triumph in its own right. Without their endurance, their fragile ingenuity, there would be no later chapters to tell. The ash and the river were their teachers, shaping not only their survival, but the very contours of humanity's path. And yet, questions remain. How close did we come to erasure in those volcanic winters? How many rivers have vanished without record, carrying with them the bones of those who depended on them? What lives were lived along banks now submerged, their stories washed into silence by rising seas? The ground we walk upon may hide answers still, bones pressed into mud, tools buried beneath layers of silt and ash, waiting for the moment when we remember to look. The chapter of ash and river closes not with resolution, but with a lingering echo. For as long as rivers flow, and as long as fire burns, the memory of those first wanderers lives on in us. Their resilience runs through our blood, their fears whisper in our dreams, and their awe at the forces of earth and sky remains etched in the marrow of our species. In them, we see ourselves, fragile, searching, yet enduring, always enduring. The plains stretched wide beneath a sky that seemed endless, a dome of pale blue by day and an ocean of stars by night. Here, life was measured not in days or months, but in the pulse of migrations. Herds of bison, aurochs, reindeer, and mammoths moved across the horizon in tides as ancient as the wind itself, and behind them, like shadows stitched to their path, came the hunters. They were lean and watchful, their eyes sharper than flint, their minds as attuned to rhythm as the beat of their own hearts. Hunger drove them, but so too did something deeper, the knowledge that survival was not merely endurance, but an art. The hunt was never simple. It demanded patience beyond reckoning. To stalk a beast meant to become the earth itself, silent, concealed, indistinguishable from the shifting grass or the whisper of stone. The hunters learned to read the ground as though it were a script. A bent reed spoke of hooves. A scatter of droppings told of time past. A faint depression in the mud revealed the path of giants that weighed more than any dwelling they could imagine. Each mark was a sentence, and to misread it was to invite failure, perhaps even death. Weapons were more than tools. They were extensions of will. A spear tipped with obsidian could pierce the hide of a reindeer or lodge in the flank of a wild horse, but against mammoths and rhinoceros, courage alone was not enough. Strategy became the heart of survival. Groups split to encircle prey, driving them toward cliffs, rivers, or ambushes set with sharpened stakes. Fires were lit to corral or confuse. Sometimes the plan worked, and a beast fell. Other times, men were trampled, scattered, or left to lick wounds in the dirt. Yet the risks were borne, for without meat, there was no tomorrow. But meat was not the only prize. The hunt gave marrow, thick with fat and energy, pulled from splintered bones with stone hammers. It gave sinew, stripped and twisted into cord strong enough to bind points to shafts. It gave hides, stretched and scraped into shelter against the winds. The beast became all things: clothing, tool, ritual object, story. To hunt was not only to live, but to transform the world itself into something that could be endured. Around the carcass, ritual began. Blood spilled on the ground was never merely waste. It was offering, gratitude, perhaps even apology. Some skulls were arranged in circles, tusks planted like monuments, bones painted with ochre, and placed in caves as though to ensure balance between the living and the dead. Archaeologists still uncover these arrangements. these silent shrines of hunters who felt the weight of what they had done. The beast had given its life, and in return, memory and meaning were shaped from its remains. Hunting was not always triumphant. Failure was frequent and merciless. Winter sharpened the hunger into agony when herds vanished south and only the toughest scavenging could keep death at bay. Wolves howled on the edge of firelight, their eyes glimmering with hunger, not unlike human eyes. Sometimes the hunters followed the wolves, learning from their patterns, stealing from their kills. In other moments, wolves followed the humans, closing in on the weak and unguarded. In time, something extraordinary happened. The boundary blurred, and wolves became companions, their loyalty forged in the shared necessity of the hunt. This alliance would shape millennia to come, but in these early moments, it was fragile, tentative, an unspoken pact sealed by firelight and bone. Consider the moment when a group, having pursued reindeer for days, finally loosed their spears. The air would have filled with the cries of beasts and men alike, the pounding of hooves against the earth, the whistling of stone points through the air. Victory, when it came, was deafening and chaotic, yet it resolved into stillness, into the heavy silence of breath steaming against cold air. Blood steamed in the frost, and hands slick with the hunt's consequence lifted blades to carve. The hunters knew this silence well, for in it lay both triumph and mourning. From such moments arose the first echoes of myth. The great beasts were more than flesh. They were teachers, guardians, enemies, and gods. Painted on the walls of caves, they appear in vast herds, charging or leaping or surrounded by human figures dwarfed by their scale. These images were not decorations. They were invocations, prayers, reminders. Perhaps they were painted before hunts, to call upon the spirit of the animal. Perhaps they were painted after, to honor what had been given. Either way, art and hunt were bound in a circle as inseparable as life and death. The fire after the hunt was different from the fire of camp. It burned not merely for warmth, but for communion. Meat roasted over flames, marrow cracked open, fat sizzling as sparks rose into the night. Stories unfolded, of the chase, of the near miss, of the moment when death brushed close and then turned aside. Children listened, eyes wide, absorbing both instruction and awe. In those stories, the animals grew larger than life, their spirits woven into the fabric of memory. A mammoth slain was not only food, but a tale told for years, shaping identity, binding the hunters into something greater than themselves. But the shadows of the hunt also carried fear. To chase a beast was to step into its world, to risk becoming prey. There were no guarantees, no certainties. A broken spear, a stumble in the mud, a sudden turn of the herd, and the hunter could be crushed, forgotten in the dust. The bones of such failures still lie scattered in riverbeds and caves, mingling with the remains of beasts they never overcame. Every success stood upon 100 failures, upon the silent sacrifices of those who did not return. The rhythm of life was dictated by the hunt, but it was also transformed by it. The need for cooperation strengthened bonds, for no single person could bring down the largest prey. Trust was forged in pursuit, and betrayal could mean starvation. Roles emerged: the trackers, the drivers, the throwers of spears, the butchers, the carriers. In these roles, the first outlines of society took shape, not as abstract hierarchies, but as necessities of survival. To belong was to live. To stand apart was to die. And still, questions linger. What did they feel in the instant before the throw? Was it only hunger, or was it reverence, fear, and exhilaration mingled together? Did they believe the beast had a soul? And if so, what did they think became of it when the blood spilled onto the earth? Did they sense that in the shadows of the hunt lay the first stirrings of meaning beyond survival? That the pursuit of life itself had become something sacred, something eternal? As the Ice Age tightened its grip, the hunts grew harder. Herds dwindled, climates shifted, landscapes changed. Yet humanity did not falter. The skills sharpened, the strategies refined. In the crucible of pursuit, we became not only hunters of flesh, but seekers of pattern, rhythm, story. Every hoofbeat echoed into myth, every spear thrust etched into memory, every shadow on the plain whispering of both fragility and strength. The shadows of the hunt stretch across millennia. They linger still in us, in the stories we tell of struggle and triumph, in the rituals we perform, in the awe we feel when we stand before animals whose presence humbles us. The hunters who walked the plains long before cities and empires left no written words, but their legacy is carved into our very being. They taught us how to endure, how to honor, how to dream. And so, as the fires of their camps flickered against the endless night, as bones cracked and marrow spilled, as voices rose in songs we can no longer hear, the hunters etched themselves into time. They became shadows, yes, but shadows that still move beside us, reminding us that in every pursuit of life, in every risk borne for survival, we are not so different from those who once stood poised with spear in hand, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the vast, trembling horizon. There comes a moment in the human story when the chase slows, when the endless rhythm of hunger and pursuit gives way to something quieter, more enduring. The fires lit at night were no longer only for warmth or warding away the darkness. They became hearths, anchors in a world that shifted endlessly with season and storm. Around them, something unseen began to stir. It was not merely survival now, it was memory, permanence, the whisper that life could mean more than the next breath. The caves tell us this. Step inside the painted chambers of Chauvet or Lascaux, Altamira or Sulawesi, and the silence is overwhelming. Flickering light reveals walls alive with herds of horses, bison, aurochs, lions, and rhinos. The images breathe. Hooves gallop across stone, horns curve into the dark, and great beasts leap as though frozen in a dream. Some are painted with detail so precise they could only have been made by eyes that studied the world with devotion, seeing not just the body of the animal, but its spirit. Others blur into abstraction, handprints smeared, dots and spirals scattered like constellations. These were not idle marks. They were messages carved into the stone bones of the earth, meant to be seen not only by the living, but by those yet to come. The hearth gave humanity time to reflect, to dream, to create. Fire turned night into a space of thought. Its glow extended the day, offering moments where stories could stretch longer than a single hunt. Around the flames, shadows danced against cave walls, and perhaps in those shadows, someone first imagined capturing what they saw. To place a hand against stone and paint its outline was to declare, I was here, I lived, I belonged to this world. But why paint animals with such reverence? Was it magic? An attempt to bind the spirit of the hunt before the spear was ever thrown? Was it gratitude, ritual sacrifice in pigment rather than blood? Or was it something deeper still, an instinct to connect, to honor the beings that sustained life? The answer is lost, but the feeling remains. Standing before those ancient images, even thousands of years later, one feels the hair rise on the skin, as though the boundary between past and present has dissolved. the hearth and the sky, the human and the animal, the living and the spirit, all were bound in these acts of creation. Stone, too, became more than shelter. It became structure, shape, and symbol. Circles of stones were raised, some for fire, others for meaning we can only guess at. The oldest known temple, Göbekli Tepe, rose more than 11,000 years ago, its carved pillars etched with foxes, vultures, serpents, and lions. It was not a dwelling, not a storehouse of grain, but something else, something sacred. Its builders dragged limestone monoliths weighing tons, shaped them into T-shaped pillars, and set them upright in circles that faced the sky. To gather and labor in such a way meant that life was no longer just about survival. It was about remembrance, community, devotion. It was about reaching beyond the human into the eternal. Even before Göbekli Tepe, other stones stood silent. Dolmens and cairns dotted the landscapes of Europe and Asia. Circles of rocks marked rituals we cannot fully decipher. These early monuments were more than functional. They were statements that here, in this place, humanity wished to leave something behind that could not be erased by the passage of time. To place stone upon stone was to resist the silence of forgetting, to stand against the erasure that had consumed so many before. The hearth and the stone also connected humanity to the sky. Nights were no longer empty. They were maps filled with stars that shifted in patterns too regular to ignore. Constellations may have been drawn in dots on cave walls, linking the hunt on Earth with the cycles above. Fire mirrored the stars, each flame a reminder of the great fires burning in the heavens. To sit by a hearth and look upward was to feel part of something vast and unknowable, a cosmic rhythm into which human lives were woven like threads. Art was not confined to walls or stone. Small figurines, carved from bone, ivory, and clay, appeared in many places. Some bore the swollen forms of women, symbols of fertility or creation. Others were animals, spirits, guardians, or charms. They could be carried, held in the hand, whispered to in prayer. These figures were hearths in miniature, portable fires of meaning, vessels of belief. They remind us that while the hunt fed the body, it was art, ritual, and symbol that began to feed the soul. Even burial changed in this time. Bodies were not always left to the elements or the jaws of scavengers. Graves were dug, ochre spread across bones like the warmth of fire, objects placed alongside the dead. Tools, beads, and ornaments were offered as though life extended beyond death. A hearth was not just fire, but memory, and the grave became its echo, a place where the flame of an individual was acknowledged even as it went dark. What stirred humanity to this? Was it the sheer weight of survival, the endless repetition that demanded something more, something that gave life meaning beyond struggle? Was it the awe of nature itself, the beasts so vast, the storms so fierce, the stars so unyielding, that inspired art and ritual as acts of reverence? Or was it simply the human mind awakening to itself, realizing it could imagine, could dream, could shape reality not only with hands but with visions? Perhaps it was all of these at once. The hearth also fostered bonds. To sit together by fire was to share warmth, food, and story. It was to become more than individuals. It was to become kin, tribe, people. Language likely flowered in these circles, words spinning into song, laughter, myth. The first philosophies may have been born in whispers beside glowing embers, questions asked of the night sky. Why do we live? Why do we die? What lies beyond the horizon? These questions would echo through temples and palaces thousands of years later, but their roots are here, in the glow of early fires and the echo of painted caves. In every flame, in every stone, humanity sought to reach beyond itself. To capture the animal in ochre was to claim continuity with it, to ensure the cycle of the hunt endured. To place stone upon stone was to declare permanence in a world of impermanence. To mark a grave was to say that a life mattered, that it could not vanish into silence unacknowledged. These acts transformed existence from mere survival into something with depth, with resonance. And yet, mystery lingers. Why did some caves hold paintings hidden deep in the dark, far beyond the reach of daily life? Why labor to crawl into passages, carrying torches, only to leave images where no sunlight would ever touch? Perhaps it was ceremony, a journey into the womb of the earth itself, a return to origins. Perhaps the dark was necessary, the silence sacred. Whatever the reason, the act itself speaks of a mind reaching for something ineffable, something larger than the human frame could contain. The hearths of stone and sky stand as reminders that humanity's story is not only one of survival, but of yearning. Even in the harshest landscapes, even with hunger pressing close, there was space for art, for ritual, for connection to the unseen. These first marks, these first monuments, were the beginnings of memory carved into the world itself. They told the earth, we were here, we mattered, we dreamed. As the embers faded at the close of night, as families drifted into sleep beneath stone shelters or within cave shadows, the fire's glow lingered on skin and wall. It was more than light. It was legacy, a fragile bridge between flesh and eternity. And when dawn came, when the hunters rose once more to follow the herds, they left behind not emptiness, but marks, signs, echoes. The hearth remained, the stones endured, the sky still burned with stars. Humanity had begun to claim its place, not just in the moment, but in time itself. The sea is a patient thief. It takes not in sudden bursts, but in centuries, pulling shorelines inward, swallowing valleys, erasing fields where once firelight glowed. What now lies beneath the waves was once the ground of human stories, settlements, paths, temples, and hearths that no eye has seen for thousands of years. We walk coastlines today and see only sand and tide, but beneath, in drowned silence, entire worlds may still sleep. When the last ice age began to release its grip, the earth shifted. Glaciers that had locked water for millennia melted, and seas rose in a slow but unstoppable flood. It was not a single cataclysm, but a rising rhythm, relentless, year upon year, until nearly 10 million square miles of land vanished under waves. The North Sea, now restless and gray, was once a wide expanse of meadows and rivers, a place archaeologists call Doggerland. Fishermen have dredged bones and tools from its floor, remnants of a vanished world where families once lit fires, hunted deer, and told stories under the same stars that burn above us still. Now those fires are drowned, their smoke dissolved into the salt of the sea. Similar stories echo elsewhere. In the Persian Gulf Basin, where oil fields now tap deep into ancient seabeds, researchers suggest that an entire fertile plain once stretched wide, watered by the Tigris, Euphrates, Karun, and other rivers. Here may have been a cradle of human settlement long before Mesopotamia became history's remembered first civilization. Some argue that when the waters rose, this plain became myth, the memory of a lost Eden, a garden drowned beyond recovery. Along India's western coast lies the Gulf of Kambat, where sonar has revealed curious formations beneath the waters, patterns of stone that may be the remnants of walls or dwellings. If true, they would belong to a time when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower, a time when coasts reached far beyond their modern outlines. The same whispers drift along the Tamil legends of Kumari Kandam, a lost land said to stretch south into the Indian Ocean, home to early poets and kingdoms erased by waves. Science regards such stories with caution, but the overlap between myth and geology is too striking to ignore. And then there is Atlantis, the most enduring of all drowned dreams. Plato's tale tells of a mighty civilization swallowed by the sea in a single night and day, its arrogance punished, its memory preserved only in story. For centuries, seekers have searched for its ruins in the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, even beneath Antarctic ice. Most scholars see Atlantis as allegory, a moral tale dressed as history. Yet the image endures because it speaks to something real, the knowledge that oceans have consumed worlds before, and that loss is written into the human condition. Whether Atlantis was story or shadow of truth, the myth clings because we sense that such erasures have indeed occurred. The silence of sunken cities is profound. Imagine walking along a modern shore at twilight, listening to waves lap gently against rock. Beneath those waters may lie fire pits, stone tools, beads once worn around the neck of a child. Their voices are gone, but the weight of their presence lingers. Archaeology on land uncovers hearths and walls. Beneath the sea, the story is harder to grasp. Sediment buries, salt corrodes, and currents scatter what once stood whole. Yet every so often, storms toss up bones of mammoth or deer, or dredging nets pull up worked flint, proof that people walked there before the water came. For those who lived through the rising seas, the flood was not abstract. It was horizon-changing, day after day, season after season. Shores where children once played slipped away. Fields became marshes, marshes became bays, bays became seas. The elders would have remembered when the water line was farther out, when a particular tree stood where now only waves roll. Memory itself must have carried the shock, weaving the first flood myths long before scribes set them to clay or parchment. Indeed, the echoes are global. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells of a flood sent by the gods, a flood survived only by one man who built a vessel. The Hebrew Bible carries the same tale in the story of Noah. Across the Indian subcontinent, Manu escapes rising waters in a boat guided by a great fish. In Greek myth, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a flood by floating in a chest. Even among indigenous peoples of the Americas, flood stories abound, each with its own voice, but each describing a world drowned and remade. Was this coincidence or cultural memory of rising seas at the end of the Ice Age? Scholars debate, but the timing is compelling. Around 12,000 years ago, as glaciers melted, global sea levels rose more than 100 meters. Vast tracts of land disappeared in living memory. It is not difficult to imagine how such events, terrifying and transformative, etched themselves into story, becoming myth, becoming eternal. The drowned world is not only loss, it is also mystery. Some ask whether beneath these seas lie not only villages of hunters and gatherers, but something more. Early civilizations erased before recorded history began. If so, what knowledge drowned with them? What structures lie beneath the waves, eroded but not erased? We know so little, for the sea keeps its secrets well. But sonar and underwater archaeology are only beginning to scratch the surface of what may rest below. Yet perhaps it is fitting that much remains hidden. The sea was always more than geography. It was boundary, liminality, a veil between known and unknown. To look out across an endless horizon is to sense both awe and fear. For those who saw their homes swallowed, The sea must have seemed alive, a devouring force, a god without mercy. But for later generations, it became a pathway, a route of exploration, the very medium through which humans would connect continents. The same waters that took became the waters that carried. The paradox endures. We are children of rivers and coasts, bound to the shore, yet always at risk of losing it. The memory of sunken lands whispers in us still, reminding us that the earth itself shifts beneath our feet, that permanence is illusion, that even civilizations may vanish as surely as villages drowned in Doggerland or plains swallowed by the Gulf. And so, we are left with questions. What voices were silenced when the seas rose? What poems, what songs, what fires? Were there stories that could have reshaped our understanding of who we are, lost now beneath the tide? Or do the drowned lands remind us that humanity is always fragile, always temporary, always at the mercy of forces greater than ourselves? The lost shores remain unseen, but not unfelt. Walk the coastline at dusk, and you may sense it, that the waves are not only waves, but echoes. They lap at the edge of our memory, reminding us that beneath them lies another earth, another story, waiting in the silence of the deep. Stone does not speak, yet it endures. Where wood rots, where cloth decays, where flesh dissolves into the soil, stone remains. Across continents, rising from mist and plain, scattered on hillsides or buried in jungle, stand the remnants of builders whose names are lost. We walk among their works with awe and confusion, for while we can measure their weight, carve their dimensions, and date their age, we cannot fully grasp their meaning. The monuments of the forgotten builders are voices from a past that refuses silence. Consider the great stones of Göbekli Tepe, rising from the Anatolian earth more than 11,000 years ago. Before agriculture, before the wheel, before the city, people gathered here to carve pillars taller than men, heavier than any one group could lift. They shaped foxes, lions, boars, and vultures into stone, surrounding themselves with animals that stalked their myths and hunts. These were not dwellings. There is no sign of hearths or cooking fires. Instead, the site whispers of gathering, of ritual, of devotion to something beyond the hunger of daily life. The effort required was immense, suggesting organization, vision, belief. But belief in what? We do not know. Archaeologists argue, but the silence of Göbekli Tepe is absolute. From Turkey, we move to Malta, where megalithic temples older than Stonehenge stand in solemn clusters. Stones weigh dozens of tons, fitted without mortar, arranged into sweeping apses and chambers. Carved spirals decorate altars, and statues of corpulent figures, their forms mysterious, still keep watch. Who built them, and why? We cannot say. The temples were abandoned long before written history, leaving only the suggestion of a people whose world was erased, but whose stones remain, stubborn against the erosion of time. Stonehenge itself, perhaps the most famous of all, sits on the Salisbury Plain like a riddle. Great sarsens stand in circles, capped by lintels, aligned to solstices so precisely that even now, thousands gather on midsummer dawn to watch the sun rise between its stones. Yet the monument is older than many of the world's written languages, and its full meaning is gone. Was it temple, tomb, calendar, or all of these together? We find bones buried in its shadow, fragments of tools, ashes of fires, yet the why eludes us. What compelled people to drag stones from miles away, to labor across generations, shaping a monument to the sky? The pattern repeats across the globe. In Peru, the walls of Sacsayhuaman rise in jagged tiers above Cusco, their stones cut with such precision that even a knife blade cannot slip between them. Each block weighs as much as a locomotive, yet they fit together in complex patterns as though molded by hand. In Egypt, pyramids rise from the desert, their geometry so exact, their scale so vast, that even after centuries of study, they retain a presence that silences the breath. In Easter Island, Moai gaze inland from the sea, their faces solemn, their bodies buried beneath volcanic soil, guardians of a story broken by time. The question is always the same. How? How did people with no iron tools, no machines, no engines, move and shape stone so heavy, so unwieldy, that even modern cranes would strain against them? Some argue for rolling logs, levers, ropes, and sheer labor. Others suggest lost techniques, forgotten knowledge, perhaps even an understanding of balance and stone that we no longer possess. A few, leaning into speculation, imagine technologies erased in resets of civilization, cycles lost beneath floods and fires. The truth is hidden, and perhaps it always will be. Yet the question of why is deeper still. To build in stone is to defy mortality. A hut of reeds lasts a season. A house of mud lasts years. But a temple of stone lasts millennia. To set stone upon stone was to make a mark not only for oneself, but for generations unborn. It was to say, we were here, we mattered, we reached for the eternal. These monuments became memory itself, anchoring human presence in a world where so much was fleeting. The builders were not forgotten in their own time. These monuments were alive, filled with fire, song, prayer, and ritual. They marked solstices, honored gods, buried leaders, guided migrations. But as centuries passed, their makers vanished, leaving only the stones to speak. Empires fell, languages dissolved, cultures shifted, yet the stones stood. The people were forgotten. The builders were not. Their works outlasted their names, and in that silence, mystery grew. Some monuments hold anomalies that deepen the riddle. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, stone blocks are cut into interlocking H shapes with such precision that modern tools would struggle to replicate them. At Baalbek in Lebanon, the foundation stones of the temple, each weighing hundreds of tons, lie so massive that their transport seems impossible. In Egypt's Great Pyramid, the alignment to true north is so exact it deviates by less than a fraction of a degree, as though its builders measured the earth with knowledge we cannot fully explain. Were these feats only the result of persistence, genius, and communal labor? Or do they hint at something more? A mastery of stone and sky that we underestimate because we measure the past against our present. To dismiss them as crude is arrogance. To attribute them to mystery is humility. Somewhere between lies the truth, human ingenuity, sharpened by necessity and guided by vision, built wonders that still defy comprehension. Stone also carried myth. To raise a monument was to create a sacred geography, a place where the human and the divine touched. Mountains became shrines carved with faces and steps. Alignments to solstice and equinox bound heaven to earth. Each monument was not only a structure, but a cosmology, a model of how the builders saw themselves within the universe. They were not forgotten to themselves. They were participants in a dialogue between earth and sky. The forgotten builders left no clear words, but their silence speaks nonetheless. Standing before their works, one feels the weight of time, the immensity of human will. These were people like us, flesh and blood, hunger and hope, yet they lifted stone as if to touch eternity. Their monuments are not only questions, but mirrors, reflecting our own desire to endure, to be remembered, to mark our place upon the earth. Perhaps that is why the stones still move us. We see in them our own reflection, the echo of a longing that has not faded. The forgotten builders are not gone. They live in every act of creation, every bridge, every tower, every cathedral and skyscraper. Their stones whisper, "You too will be forgotten, but your works may endure. What you build, if built with vision, may outlast your name." The monuments remain, but their makers do not. This is the paradox of history. The works outlive the worker. The stone outlasts the hand. We call them forgotten, yet in truth they are remembered more than most, for their silence compels us to imagine, to fill in what cannot be known. And perhaps that was their greatest achievement, to leave us not answers, but questions that burn even now. As dusk falls upon the circle of stones, as wind sweeps across the plain or jungle reclaims a forgotten temple, the monuments breathe. They are not ruins. They are echoes. They remind us that humanity has always reached beyond itself, always sought to leave behind something greater than flesh. The forgotten builders may be nameless, but their voice is eternal, carried in stone, heard in silence, felt in the marrow of all who come after. History, as we tell it, moves forward. We imagine it as a line, hunters to farmers, villages to cities, empires to nations, one invention leading neatly to the next. But what if the truth is not a line at all? What if human history is a circle, broken again and again by catastrophe, reset by fire, flood, and sky? There are moments in the archaeological record where silence yawns. Entire cultures vanish, leaving behind fragments with no explanation. Great cities rise, then fall into ruin. Landscapes shift with sudden violence, erasing generations. The earth itself seems to breathe in cycles, offering life, then taking it away. These interruptions remind us that history is not only a story of progress, but also of collapse, and perhaps of resets so complete that memory itself was washed away. The Younger Dryas is one such shadow. Roughly 12,800 years ago, just as the Ice Age was easing and climates were warming, the world was thrust abruptly back into cold. Glaciers surged, plants withered, animals died, and human communities scattered. For over 1,000 years, survival returned to hardship. What caused it? Theories abound. Some point to the sudden release of meltwater disrupting ocean currents. Others propose a comet impact or fragments of a larger body striking the ice sheets, unleashing firestorms, floods, and dust that dimmed the sun. Whatever the cause, the effect was clear. The trajectory of humanity was interrupted, its fragile beginnings forced into retreat. If such a catastrophe struck, what might have been erased? Some researchers speculate that early civilizations, small, scattered, but more advanced than we assume, could have been destroyed, leaving only myths in their place. The flood stories that echo across cultures may be memories of this reset, fragments of survival retold as divine judgment or cosmic fate. Atlantis, Kumari Kandam, or other drowned lands may be less fantasy than distorted memory of worlds undone by ice and fire. Consider also the volcanic eruptions that scarred deep time. The Toba super eruption 74,000 years ago blanketed skies in ash, reducing sunlight, killing plants, and driving humanity to the edge. Genetic studies suggest our ancestors may have dwindled to mere thousands, a bottleneck so narrow that all living humans today descend from that fragile thread. One eruption, one wound in the earth, nearly erased us. If we survived such devastation, how many other rises were extinguished entirely? The record hints at cycles. The Maya of Central America built cities of grandeur, charted the heavens, wrote in stone. Then their world collapsed, climate shifts, drought, political strife, the delicate balance undone. The Indus Valley civilization thrived with plumbing, trade, and planned cities, only to fade into silence. Angkor, Cahokia, Great Zimbabwe, all rose, all fell. We record these as collapses, but perhaps they are smaller echoes of a greater pattern, the inevitability of rise and reset. What is erased in each reset is not only material, but memory. Stories distort, myths absorb fact, and what was once knowledge becomes legend. The builders of Göbekli Tepe raised stones long before the pyramids, but who remembers them? Their names are gone, their reasons forgotten. 1,000 years from now, what will remain of us? Skyscrapers may crumble, cities may vanish, and perhaps only fragments of our own age will endure, puzzling whoever follows. Some thinkers stretch this cycle further. What if civilization is not a recent phenomenon at all? What if deep in the past, tens of thousands of years ago or more, there were cultures erased so completely we see only faint traces? Could unexplained artifacts, anomalous carvings, or strange alignments be remnants of earlier resets? Mainstream archaeology holds firm, but the question lingers, fueled by the gaps in our record. What lies beneath miles of silt, ice, or sea? How many resets could bury entire histories? The idea unsettles because it reminds us of fragility. We like to believe we are permanent, that progress is unbroken. Yet the Earth has other plans. Comets pass through, volcanoes sleep and wake, oceans rise, climates shift. Our cities are no less vulnerable than those of the Maya or the Harappans. One catastrophe, one cosmic visitor, one tilt of climate, and our story too could become myth. Perhaps it is not arrogance, but survival itself that forces us to believe we are the first, the only, the inevitable. To admit cycles is to admit impermanence, but cycles are also renewal. A forest burned by fire grows green again. Floodplains left barren become fertile with silt. Humanity itself, though wounded, has always found ways to endure. From each reset came resilience, invention, adaptation. The world after Toba gave rise to new migrations, new creativity. The world after the Younger Dryas saw the dawn of agriculture, the first steps toward cities. Perhaps resets are not only destruction, but also genesis, the crucibles in which humanity reinvents itself. And yet, the myths remain. They whisper of golden ages lost, of knowledge drowned, of gods who once walked with men and then withdrew. They whisper of cycles greater than memory, of resets so vast they reset not only culture, but imagination itself. Standing before the ruins of civilizations, one cannot help but wonder, are we only one layer in an unending spiral, one age among many that will rise and fall upon this patient earth? The age of reset is not finished. Even now, our climate warms, seas rise, storms grow stronger, and fires spread. The echoes of past collapses are visible in our present, reminders written not in stone, but in air and water. The question is not whether resets happen, but when the next will come, and what will remain when it does. Will our monuments endure as the stones of the forgotten builders endure? Or will future eyes look upon our ruins and see only silence, only fragments, only myths? History may be a circle. We may not be the first, nor the last. We may be only one voice in a chorus of civilizations, each singing briefly before the earth resets the stage. And in that possibility lies both humility and awe. For if our story is fragile, if our permanence is illusion, then every moment matters more. Every act of creation, every word spoken, every stone raised is both fleeting and eternal. It may vanish, yet it may echo. It may be erased, yet it may endure in ways we cannot foresee. The forgotten builders left their stones. The flood survivors left their myths. We leave our own marks, uncertain of what will survive the next cycle. The age of reset is both warning and wonder, a reminder that nothing is guaranteed, and that perhaps it is in impermanence itself that meaning is found. When the night is stripped of its modern glow, when no city lights dull the horizon and no machines hum in the distance, the sky reveals its true self. It is vast, infinite, filled with fire. For our ancestors, this was not scenery. It was revelation. The heavens were a book written in fire, a map, a story, a warning. Every night, the watchers in the sky lifted their eyes upward and found meaning there, stitching the movements of stars into the fabric of their lives. It is difficult for us, bound to screens and clocks, to imagine the intimacy our ancestors had with the heavens. For them, every dawn and dusk, every moonrise and eclipse was part of a rhythm. Crops, migrations, hunts, and rituals all answered to the cycles of the sky. The solstices marked the longest day and the longest night, symbols of renewal and return. Equinoxes balanced light and darkness, teaching symmetry in the chaos of time. The moon waxed and waned, carving months before months had names. To watch the heavens was not optional. It was survival. But the sky was not only practical. It was mystery, order in a world of uncertainty. Why did the stars wheel so predictably, yet comets streaked with sudden terror? Why did the moon grow and vanish, reborn each month? Why did the sun sometimes darken in midday or bleed red at the horizon? To watch the sky was to watch eternity unfold, to glimpse forces greater than any river or stone. And so, the watchers lifted not only their eyes but their imaginations, and out of the sky came myth, ritual, and monuments. At Newgrange in Ireland, built more than 5,000 years ago, a passageway of stone stretches into a mound. For most of the year, it lies in darkness. But on the winter solstice, as dawn breaks, the rising sun sends a beam of light through the passage, illuminating the chamber within. To build such precision was to bind earth and sky, to ensure that even in the darkest season, light would return. It was both science and prayer, astronomy and hope, written in stone against the uncertainty of winter. In England, Stonehenge too answers to the heavens. Its trilithons and circles align to midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset. Gatherings there were not only celebrations, but communions with the cosmos. The builders were telling time on a scale greater than their own lives. The stones themselves became a calendar, eternal, immune to the fleeting span of a human heartbeat. Across the Atlantic, the Maya carved temples into stairways of the sky. At Chichen Itza, on the equinox, the sun casts a serpent-shaped shadow down the pyramid of Kukulkan, a stone snake descending as day and night balance. Such precision was no accident. The Maya charted Venus with an accuracy that rivals modern astronomy. They saw the planet's cycle as divine rhythm, tying it to war, harvest, and fate. To them, the heavens were alive, and the watchers were interpreters of its living script. Even earlier, at Nabta Playa in the Sahara, long before Egypt's pyramids, stones were arranged in circles aligned to the rising of Orion and Sirius. These were not idle arrangements, but markers of the sky's order, set in a desert that once bloomed with water and life. When the land dried, the sky remained, a compass pointing toward continuity, even as Earth withered. Everywhere we look, the same pattern appears. In the Andes, Machu Picchu aligns with solstices and mountain peaks, blending architecture with celestial order. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid's shafts point toward Orion's belt and the star Sirius, tying royal tombs to eternity above, In China, oracle bones record eclipses, while ancient observatories such as Taosi and later at Dengfeng mark equinoxes with shadow and light. Humanity has always been watching. But what did they see beyond practicality? Did they see the stars as gods or as messages from forgotten ancestors? Did they believe, as some myths suggest, that knowledge came down from the heavens, gifted by beings who walked among them? Were alignments acts of worship or remembrance of something older, something inherited from a past we barely imagine? These questions open the door to speculation, and speculation has always followed the sky. The stars themselves became characters in story. Orion the hunter, Taurus the bull, Scorpio, Leo. These constellations, named differently across cultures, nevertheless carried shared patterns. Stories mirrored hunts, beasts, and cycles of life below. It is striking that cultures separated by oceans still saw animals and figures in the same scatterings of fire. Was this coincidence or evidence of a shared inheritance, stories carried from an age before dispersal? Some scholars argue it is simply the human instinct to see patterns. Others wonder if it hints at memory far older than we admit. Eclipses were terror and omen. Imagine standing in a field, watching the sun vanish in the middle of day, the world cast into shadow, animals silent, birds confused. To us, it is celestial mechanics. To them, it was a dragon devouring the light, a sign of wrath or warning. Entire rituals were built to protect against the darkness, to coax the sun's return. When it did return, relief was immense, and the rituals became tradition. Comets, too, stirred fear. Their sudden brightness defied the order of the sky, streaking across the heavens like swords or torches. To the watchers, they were portents of kings dying, of wars coming, of the world shifting. The regularity of stars gave comfort. The irregularity of comets gave dread. And in that balance of order and chaos, humanity sensed a reflection of its own fragile place. The watchers did not only look upward, they built lives around the sky. Calendars, carved into bone or etched into stone, tracked lunar cycles. Agricultural seasons answered to the heavens. Rituals of planting and harvest were tied to solstices and equinoxes, ensuring the community moved in harmony with the great clock above. The sky was not distant, it was intimate, woven into the pulse of daily life. But perhaps the greatest mystery is this: why did humanity align stone to stars with such obsession? Was it only survival, or something else? Some propose the sky was seen as a gateway, a place where souls traveled after death, where ancestors dwelled, where gods watched. To align a temple to Orion was not only to mark time, but to open a pathway, to tether the earth to the eternal. The Watchers were not only scientists, but priests, visionaries, dreamers who sought connection to what lay beyond reach. Today, we study these alignments with instruments and mathematics. We calculate precision, model movements, reconstruct calendars. Yet standing at dawn in New Grange, or beneath the solstice light of Stonehenge, one feels something deeper. It is not numbers alone. It is awe. It is the same awe our ancestors must have felt, the same trembling recognition that we are small and the sky immense, and yet somehow the two are bound together. The Watchers in the sky remind us that humanity has always reached upward. We sought not only to endure, but to understand, not only to survive, but to belong to something infinite. In every alignment, in every carved star, in every myth whispered beneath the constellations, we hear the echo of that longing. The heavens are still there, unchanged, burning as they did for those who first lifted their eyes in wonder. The Watchers are gone, but their legacy endures, in temples, in myths, in the very rhythm of our calendars. They looked upward, and in doing so, taught us that we are part of something greater than ourselves. And yet, mystery lingers. Did they only watch, or did they remember? Did the stars remind them of stories lost in the age of reset, of knowledge drowned with the floods and buried in forgotten lands? Were they mapping not only the sky, but memory itself, tracing lines of fire that connected them to ages we no longer see? The watchers leave us with questions that cannot be answered, only felt. The stars burn on, the alignments remain, and every time we look upward, we join them, continuing a vigil that began long before us and will last long after we are gone. Myths are stubborn things. They outlast kingdoms, slip through the collapse of languages, and echo even when the stones of temples are rubble. They change shape, gather new details, cross oceans with migrating peoples, but their heart remains. Wherever we listen in the human story, we hear them. Tales of a flood that swallowed the earth, of giants who once walked among us, of golden ages lost, of fire from the sky. They are told by farmers and scribes, whispered in caves and carved into tablets, sung around hearths and written into holy texts. Why do they endure? What root of memory clings so fiercely that it refuses erasure? Perhaps the most universal of these is the flood. From Mesopotamia comes the tale of Utnapishtim, who built a great vessel to survive waters sent by angry gods. In the Hebrew tradition, Noah answers the same command, saving his family and the animals of the earth. In India, Manu is warned by a fish, guiding his boat to safety. In Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha float in a chest, repopulating the world after deluge. In the Americas, from the Hopi to the Inca, stories abound of waters rising, swallowing the land, leaving only survivors on mountain peaks or in boats. Even in the Pacific Islands, flood stories flow like tides across scattered atolls. Different names, different gods, yet the same essence. The world drowned, and only a few endured. Are these coincidences, parallel imaginations spun from fear of rain and river? Or are they echoes of real events, the rising seas at the end of the Ice Age, the floods that swallowed Doggerland, the sudden surges of meltwater that reshaped coasts? The question haunts archaeology and myth alike. It is possible that these stories are cultural memories of catastrophe, preserved in poetic form long after the facts faded. If so, then myth is not fantasy but history retold in symbol. The waters may have been real. Beyond floods lie tales of giants. In the Hebrew Bible, the Nephilim are mighty men of old, men of renown, born of gods and mortals. In Greek myth, the Gigantes rose against Olympus, their vast bodies cast down by thunderbolts. Norse tradition speaks of Jotnar, frost giants who loom at the edges of the world. In Native American stories, giant beings roam plains and mountains, sometimes protectors, sometimes destroyers. Even in Africa and Oceania, echoes of giant ancestors persist. Were these merely metaphors for mountains, storms, and natural forces? Or do they hint at something older? A memory of beings now lost, perhaps inspired by encounters with megafauna, the mammoths and mastodons that dwarfed human hunters. Bones of giant ground sloths or elephants may have seeded the imagination, their remains mistaken for humanoid forms. Yet the persistence of giants in so many traditions suggests more than error. It suggests longing for an age when the world was larger, stranger, less domesticated than now. Then there are the myths of golden ages. Hesiod spoke of a time when humans lived without toil, when the earth gave freely, when peace reigned. Hindu tradition, recalls Satya Yuga, the first of ages, when truth prevailed and gods walked among men. Many indigenous American myths recall times of harmony before corruption brought ruin. These stories are not about floods or fire, but about loss. Loss of innocence, of purity, of a world unscarred by greed and death. Were these simply idealized dreams, ways to critique the present by imagining a better past? Or do they preserve faint memories of eras before resets, when climates were stable, food abundant, and life seemed easier? Fire from the sky appears too often to be ignored. Myths tell of comets and meteors as divine weapons. The Aztecs feared the return of the sun's destruction by fire. Norse prophecy speaks of Ragnarok, when the heavens will blaze and stars will fall. Australian Aboriginal traditions describe fire from the sky so vividly that scientists now study them for evidence of ancient meteor impacts. One tradition from the Arunti people in Central Australia recounts a fiery object crashing to Earth, reshaping the land. In North America, the Clovis culture declined around the time some scientists argue comet fragments struck, sparking wildfires and extinctions. Perhaps the fire from the sky was not metaphor. Perhaps it was memory. Even creation itself is framed in mythic echoes that repeat across the globe. A cosmic egg cracks open to birth the universe in Hindu, Chinese, and Finnish traditions. The world tree rises in Norse Yggdrasil, Mesoamerican Saba, and Siberian myths. Chaos precedes order in Greek, Babylonian, and Egyptian accounts. How is it that cultures separated by oceans describe the beginning of everything in such similar terms? Is it simply the human instinct to imagine birth, tree, and chaos? Or does it reflect an ancient, shared seed of memory carried by migrating peoples from the dawn of storytelling? What makes myths that refuse to die so powerful is their ambiguity. They do not tell us exactly what happened. They tell us what mattered. A flood may not have covered the globe, but for a people whose valley was swallowed, it felt like the world had ended. A giant may never have walked, but the memory of creatures taller than trees could become a figure of story. A golden age may never have existed, but the longing for one makes it real in imagination. Myths endure because they speak to both reality and desire, to both history and hope. And yet, one cannot shake the feeling that buried within these stories is more than imagination. Perhaps they are the last voices of forgotten ages. If civilizations rose and fell before our remembered history, their traces may remain not in ruins, but in stories. The myths that refuse to die may be fragments of that erased memory, carried in rhythm and song, surviving where stone did not. Consider how fragile memory is. Languages die within centuries. Empires collapse within millennia. Without writing, knowledge can vanish in a few generations. And yet myth persists, reshaped, but never erased. It is humanity's most durable inheritance, more enduring than palaces or statues. Even if the builders are forgotten, their stories cling, whispered from parent to child, reimagined in each retelling, altered but alive. Myth is the archive of memory, coded in symbol, resistant to time. For modern ears, myth is often dismissed as fiction, a quaint prelude to science. But to stand within its current is to feel something more. Myths are the pulse of humanity across time, reminders that we have always asked the same questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What forces shape us? What awaits when the cycle ends? These questions never die, and so the stories never die. They wear new names, new forms, but the heart beats on. Floods, giants, golden ages, fire from the sky, whether metaphor or memory, They endure because they are ours. They tell us we belong to a story greater than ourselves, a story written not only in earth and stone but in imagination, echoing across continents, across ages, across resets. And so, as night deepens and the fire burns low, myths are told still. Children listen, wide-eyed, to tales of waters rising, of monsters slain, of worlds remade. And in their listening, the chain continues. The myths that refuse to die carry us forward, reminding us that in their ambiguity lies our deepest truth. We are creatures of story, and through story, we endure. The earth does not yield its secrets easily. Most of what we know of the past comes from fragments, bones, shards, foundations, ashes. Archaeology builds a story from these pieces, careful, deliberate, cautious. Yet every so often, something emerges that does not fit. An artifact appears in the wrong place, the wrong age, the wrong context. A tool carved beyond known capacity, a fossil where it should not be, a structure older than our timeline allows. These anomalies are the archaeological enigmas, riddles scattered across the record, unsettling in their persistence. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off a Greek island in 1901. At first, it seemed no more than corroded bronze fragments, but closer study revealed a device of staggering complexity, gears and dials capable of tracking celestial movements with precision rivaling a modern clock. It is now called the world's first analog computer, built more than 2,000 years ago. Yet, for centuries after, nothing like it appears in the record. Was it an isolated brilliance, lost and forgotten until rediscovered in modern age? Or was it evidence of a deeper tradition, erased by time? In India, at Dwarka beneath the Arabian Sea, sonar surveys have revealed structures that appear like walls and streets, far older than expected. Some suggest they may predate the Harappan civilization, submerged as seas rose at the end of the Ice Age. If so, then our notion of when urban life began must shift backward into shadows we scarcely recognize. Across South America, walls of cyclopean stone rise at sites such as Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo. The blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, are cut with angles so precise that they interlock without mortar, their seams resisting even earthquakes. The Inca themselves claimed these works were inherited, not built by their own hands, attributing them to earlier peoples whose names are lost. Were they only preserving myth? Or was there truth, that a forgotten culture mastered stone in ways we still do not fully understand? Farther north, in Bolivia, lies Pumapunku, a site of intricately carved stone blocks. Many are shaped into geometric forms, with holes drilled and channels cut in ways that suggest advanced techniques. Scholars argue the tools of the builders were sufficient: stone hammers, patience, labor. Yet standing among the blocks, one feels the strangeness. How did people with no steel, no machines, create angles so exact, surfaces so smooth, joints so seamless? We can offer explanations, but unease lingers, a whisper that something is missing. Even in Europe, the enigma persists. At Baalbek in Lebanon, the foundation stones of the Roman Temple of Jupiter are massive beyond belief. The stone of the pregnant woman weighs more than 1,000 tons, yet lies quarried, ready, as though awaiting transport. How was such a block moved? Or was it never moved at all? Did the Romans inherit something older, something they built upon rather than began? Artifacts, too, stir wonder. Hammerheads encased in rock, metallic spheres pulled from ancient seams, footprints in strata millions of years old. Many of these are later dismissed, explained as misinterpretations. natural formations mistaken for tools. But some resist easy dismissal. Even when debunked, the sheer number of anomalies leaves an impression. Perhaps the record is more complex than we imagine. There are carvings and texts that complicate the picture as well. In Egypt, depictions at Abydos are said by some to resemble modern machines, helicopters, submarines, airplanes, though most scholars explain them as overlapping hieroglyphs. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians spoke of kings reigning for thousands of years, dynasties stretching into mythical time. Were these only symbols, exaggerations of power? Or do they reflect a memory of ages measured differently, remembered dimly in stone? Even human remains carry riddles. The Denisovans, known from only a few fragments of bone and tooth in Siberia, reveal a lineage that interbred with us, yet left barely a trace in the fossil record. We know they existed, but their story is largely silence. How many others lived, unknown, unseen, erased, except for a sliver of DNA? If entire peoples can vanish without leaving more than a finger bone, what else may have slipped beyond recognition? The enigma is not only in objects, but in gaps. Agriculture appears in multiple regions around the same time, as though knowledge bloomed in parallel. Megaliths rise across continents, each aligned to the stars, each shaped from stone, though separated by oceans. Myths echo similar patterns, floods and giants retold across distant cultures. We can explain this by human similarity, by convergent invention, by shared necessity. Yet the gaps remain wide enough for wonder. Could there have been transmissions of knowledge, contacts long before we believe oceans were crossed? Or were these memories inherited from a deeper time, now forgotten but echoed unconsciously? Science is cautious, and rightly so. Anomalies are often accidents, coincidences, misreadings, yet the persistence of enigma gnaws at certainty. We crave coherence, but the record is jagged, uneven, filled with contradictions. Each anomaly is a loose thread. Pull hard enough, and the fabric of history trembles. And so, we are left with questions. Are anomalies evidence of lost civilizations, reset by catastrophe, their remnants scattered and misunderstood? Are they hints of knowledge we once held and then forgot, survivors of cycles erased? Or are they simply reminders of our own limitations, that we do not yet see the whole picture, that humility must guide us as much as certainty? The archaeological enigma is not an argument for fantasy. It is an invitation to curiosity. It reminds us that the past is not closed, that discovery is ongoing, that the earth still holds secrets we have not uncovered. Every shovel turned, every dive into the sea, every scan of a forgotten plain may bring something that unsettles the story we thought complete. Perhaps the greatest enigma is not a single artifact or site, but the silence itself. For every ruin we uncover, thousands more lie buried. For every story we reconstruct, countless more are lost. History is not a line, but a constellation of fragments shining against a vast darkness. We connect the points as best we can, but the spaces between remain immense. In those spaces, myth grows, speculation stirs, awe lingers. The forgotten builders, the drowned shores, the watchers in the sky, all converge here, in the riddle of what is left behind. The archaeological enigma is not a problem to solve, but a mystery to live with. It tells us that humanity is older, stranger, more fragile, and more inventive than we believe. It tells us that certainty is illusion, and that the past is always larger than the present can contain. As we walk through museums, or climb the steps of ruined temples, or hold in our hands a shard of flint shaped by someone tens of thousands of years ago, we are not only looking backward, We are peering into a mirror, one that reflects our own impermanence. One day, we too will be fragments, our cities rubble, our tools misunderstood. To those who follow, we may be the enigma. And in that recognition lies both humility and wonder. The human story is short, almost unbearably so. Set against the 4.5 billion years of Earth's age, our entire existence is no more than a breath, a flicker of flame across an endless night. And yet, within that flicker, we have burned brightly. We have carved stone, painted caves, crossed seas, raised monuments, told stories, and looked upward at the stars, wondering if we are alone. The question now, as it has always been, is not only who we are, but how we fit into the immensity of time. Deep time is not measured in centuries or dynasties. It is measured in epochs and extinctions, in tectonic shifts and ice ages, in oceans rising and receding across millions of years. Our species, Homo sapiens, has walked the earth for perhaps 300,000 years, a mere moment. Before us were Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, Homo habilis, and countless others, whose names are known only through fragments of bone. Before them, for millions of years, were other apes, other mammals, other lives shaped by forests and plains. Before mammals, the age of reptiles. Before reptiles, the seas swarmed with trilobites and ammonites. Before even them, life stirred as single cells in ancient oceans. We are a recent note in a symphony that began long before us, and yet, though brief, our note carries resonance. We are the only beings we know of who have looked back upon deep time and recognized it. We hold fossils in our hands and see not stone, but ancestors. We gaze at galaxies and see not points of light, but worlds, perhaps with lives of their own. We alone carry the burden and the wonder of self-awareness stretched across ages, but deep time is also a reminder of fragility. More than 99% of all species that ever lived are gone. Entire lineages have risen, flourished, and vanished, leaving only faint impressions in stone. Dinosaurs ruled the earth for nearly 200 million years, an empire of unimaginable scale, and yet they are gone, undone by a sudden blow from the sky. We have walked the earth for only a fraction of that span. To believe ourselves immune is to forget the lesson of deep time. Nothing endures forever. What, then, will remain of us? If our cities crumble, if our records fade, what will survive? Perhaps only stone, the pyramids, the moai, the great walls, the buried ruins of cities. Perhaps only fragments of metal encased in sediment. Perhaps only myths retold by survivors, reshaped in firelight as they always have been. In a million years, what we call civilization may be nothing but a thin layer of strange debris in the geological record, a scar of plastic, concrete, and steel marking our brief presence. And yet, even that scar is astonishing. For within our short span, we have reached into the cosmos itself. We have walked on the moon, sent machines to the edges of the solar system, mapped galaxies billions of light years away. In the silence of deep time, we have raised our eyes and dared to ask questions that echo across eternity. Where did we come from? Are we alone? What lies beyond? To imagine humanity in deep time is to hold two truths at once. One truth is humility. We are fleeting, fragile, easily erased. The other truth is wonder. We are capable of seeing the vastness, of knowing our fragility, and still creating meaning within it. That is no small thing. In a universe that may be indifferent, we burn with questions. We reach for story. We carve memory into stone. The myths that refuse to die, the monuments that endure, the enigmas that unsettle, all point to this. we are more than survival. From the first fires by the riverbanks, we have sought not only to live, but to matter, to leave a mark that outlasts the body. Deep time reminds us that nothing is permanent, but it also reminds us that even impermanence can be beautiful. A song sung and forgotten still filled the air for a moment. A stone raised and toppled still touched the sky. A life lived and ended still rippled outward, carrying love, struggle, and meaning into the world. Perhaps this is why our ancestors looked upward with such devotion. The stars seemed eternal, unchanging, burning beyond the span of generations. To align a temple to the solstice, to carve Orion into stone, was to tether human fragility to cosmic endurance. Yet even stars die, even galaxies collide. Deep time stretches beyond our imagination, and even the heavens we gaze at now will one day be different. But perhaps that makes the act of watching, of remembering, of building all the more sacred. We stand, then, at the intersection of two immensities: the immensity of the past, filled with resets, extinctions, forgotten ages, and the immensity of the future, stretching forward into silence. Between them, we are a breath. And yet what a breath it is. We have filled it with language, art, song, myth, knowledge, and love. We have endured floods and fires, hunted mammoths and built cities, told stories of gods and stars. We have made meaning in the face of impermanence. The question is not whether we will endure forever. Deep time answers that already. We will not. The question is what we will make of the time we have. Will we leave only ruins, or will we leave wisdom? Will we vanish into silence, or will we seed futures we cannot yet imagine? Perhaps both. Perhaps our legacy will be layered, fragments of stone and myth, echoes and enigmas, carried into ages beyond reckoning. And perhaps that is enough. To be human is not to escape time, but to live within it, to know its vastness and still carve our fleeting mark. We are not gods, nor giants, nor immortals. We are wanderers who paint walls, raise stones, tell stories, and watch the stars. That is our greatness, not permanence, but presence. Deep time humbles us, but it also dignifies us. It tells us that though we are small, we are also rare. In the silence of the cosmos, life is fragile, and consciousness rarer still. We may be brief, but we are luminous. We are a flame burning against an infinite night, fragile and fleeting, yet filled with wonder. And so the story closes not with certainty, but with awe. We do not know if giants walked, if lost civilizations thrived, if floods retold in myth were histories preserved in symbol. We do not know if resets will come again or when. We do not know what awaits us beyond the stars. But we know this: we are here, for this moment, in this age, walking upon a planet filled with echoes of forgotten lives, looking upward at a sky filled with questions that will never be fully answered. That is enough to stir wonder. That is enough to remind us that we belong to something larger. That is enough to make us pause and listen and feel the weight and the beauty of time itself. And in that pause, in that silence between heartbeat and eternity, we become what we have always been: storytellers at the edge of the unknown, watchers of the sky, children of earth, fleeting yet eternal in the echo of our presence.